The 9.5-mile move to Rosemont of the church was a very large step for St. John's growth. As the church was being prepared for the move by the Depke Company, St. John's congregation was invited to hold its Sunday services in the Rosemont Methodist Church, which was also a German church at that time. From the words of Pastor William Pilgrim, written in the Dakota County Tribune on June 17, 1938, he wrote, "Thus, with next Sunday, St. John's Lutheran congregation will hold its services in the town of Rosemont and discontinue the services in the country near Nichols Station. We believe there is room in every little town for a Lutheran church, and since this town has none as yet, we are happy to have the opportunity of locating there. St. John's congregation has been urged and invited to come in for some time, but such matters could not be carried out so quickly. However, we believe that the Lord is now prepared the way, and we shall look to Him for further guidance and blessing. St. John's is coming to Rosemont as an organized congregation. We have no desire to oppose the work of any other church or to divest them of their members, but our doors shall be open to all who wish to worship with us, and we herewith extend a cordial invitation. Moving operations on our church building have already begun, and we hope to have our house of worship in Rosemont soon. We wish to thank the local Methodist Church for their kind permission to use their church building for our services until we get settled. It is our hope and prayer that St. John's may enjoy the goodwill of the community and that we might be helpful to each other for the Master's glory. W. J. Pilgrim. The start of the move was delayed because of many rainstorms that made the roads very soggy. It was during this time, about 3 weeks, that the church was up on blocks and rollers, ready to move when a large windstorm sprang up, and the members were very concerned that it might blow over. But the winds calmed, and on July 11, 1938, the move began. Pulling from the backside, the moving route was east on County Road 30, south on Pilot Knob, and east on County Road 42, where the church had to go through a pasture for 3/4 of a mile to avoid wires. But still a section of highline wires had to be lowered to allow passage. The move was completed within 1 week. The cost reported in the Dakota County Tribune was $625, plus cost for lowering the wires. But the figure logged into the 1938 Treasurer's Report was $250. What's most interesting on this year-end report is the total church expenditures totaling only $681.05. What a change from today. On July 31st, the congregation met for one of the last times in the Methodist Church, then went over to St. John's for the cornerstone laying ceremony, where various articles placed into a deposit box were mortared into the foundation. The completed stone was then dedicated as the cornerstone of St. John's Church. Then the time had arrived for the dedication of the church. It was on August 14th, 1938 at 10:30 a.m. that the congregation singing, "Open Now Thy Gates of Beauty," processed up the stairs and entered their church once again. As blocks were being laid into place, it was only proper to install and dedicate a cornerstone. So in early July 1957, this block dated 1888 and 1957 was laid and mortared into place by Pastor Bainey as the congregation looked on. The education unit was constructed completely that year by the Adolphson and Peterson Company of Minneapolis. Only the painting and laying of the tile floor, which was donated solely by a prominent member, was done by the congregation. This education unit was completed in time for Christmas Eve services that year, when the congregation celebrated for one more time a dedication of a new church. Because of Pastor Bainey's inspiration, we were not to stop here. 2 years later, in 1960, a parsonage was built just southwest of the church. Pastor Bainey, who was the major contributor, thought it was fitting for his wife and future families to have a home that would warm the hearts of all. This parsonage was built nearly with all volunteer free labor and was the finest home in Rosemont at that time. As St. John's continued to grow, Pastor Doreen arrived in January of 1961 and was the pastor when St. John's celebrated its 75th anniversary on June 14, 1964. An afternoon of activities were planned by the anniversary committee, which included a duet by Irene Linkert, a longtime organist for the church, and Nadine Vogelgesang. This committee also spent several hours assembling this Diamond Jubilee brochure that told the story of St. John's. Included in this was the 1910 church, the 1919 church, the present church, and the proposed church. In 1965, the congregation called Reverend W.C. Freest. It was during his term that this committee, headed by Ron Gustafson, was formed in 1967 to finish the dream of completing the church sanctuary. While the committee reviewed the original architect's design, many hours were spent in updating the ideas projected earlier. One of their requirements was that the building be totally accessible to the handicapped, the first in the community to pioneer this principle. Architects Cohn and Peterson drew up the final plans. It was quite different from the original, and the location on the lot was altered. This aerial picture shows the new location as the church members outlined the foundation during groundbreaking ceremonies on March 30th, 1969. There had been a late snowstorm just prior to this Palm Sunday ceremony. At a cost of $260,000, the construction was completed the following year, and dedication services were held on April 5, 1970, on what was called John Street at that time. The beauty of the church was quite overwhelming, as it is today. This new section included the sanctuary with brick walls, lapped cedar ceiling, skylights, an altar area of stained red oak and bird's eye maple, and stained glass windows. The narthex, with paneled dark oak and brick walls and red cordelie tile covering the floor, that branched off to a library and office area. And the mother's room, that looked into the sanctuary as well as an attached nursery area. As the visiting clergy looked on with Pastor Freest at this dedication brochure, it highlighted the most beautiful stained glass windows, the three larger ones representing faith, hope, and charity, and the small section representing baptism and communion. After the sanctuary dedication, Pastor David Wold was installed on June 21, 1970, and served until 1979. He served with the first associate pastor, Alan Jardine, who was installed in July of 1975 and resigned in 1980. Council action was taken after this, as Leif Munson arrived on a part-time basis to fill this vacancy. Munson served until 1984, when health caused him to resign. St. John's present clergy staff, at its 100-year mark, now nearly 2,500 members strong, is Reginald Torreson, who was installed September 14, 1980, as the senior pastor. Reverend Steve Hagmark, who was installed March 1, 1981, as the associate pastor, and Reverend James Tetley, who was installed September 22, 1985, as assistant pastor.